I'm live, huh? So, I've had about 150 something shakes this evening, tuning into world events and then feeling presence, feeling negativity, collective negativity that needs to be transformed. It's terrible work. It's terrifying work. I don't know if you ever watched this show called Twin Peaks. It was a miniseries. Ultimately, it was about a murderer that wasn't a person. It was an entity that inhabited different people, but it took years before you understood that's what it was about. That's what this is about. When the quote unquote enemy is not physical, you have a very significant choice to make right from the beginning. How are you going to perceive the situation? Many people, most people that I have known in my life, wouldn't necessarily question the initial perspective. And yet, the initial perspective is the most important factor. And often, the only seeming choice within that is yes or no, a rejection or an embrace of the initial perspective, which eventually becomes a polarization. Now, why does this matter? The United States is composed almost entirely of people with a rather short heritage on this land. Before arrival, these are people who left. Let's be that simple. People who left other places and came here. Now, people who leave other places and come here, often arriving without many others, get the opportunity to write their own story. And when people write their own story, they write the story they want to believe, usually. So we don't have the perspective of a community that has known a family for centuries and centuries in many cases, as is normal in most parts of the world. Most parts of the world are inhabited by communities that have links, long roots back. And yet here we're inundated with beings who chose to leave their communities and come here. And I promise you that many of them were not exemplary, loving, wonderful people where they came from. They left because they were no longer welcome. Now, certainly there are many situations in which they left because they were no longer welcome, because there was horrible things happening, totalitarianism, just mob rule by some thug. That was normal also. But bear in mind, we got such a wide diversity here in America. Now, this matters because this was part of the story. This was always part of the point, to gather a lot of energy from all over the world and bring it here. I say here, I am blessed deeply to find out that more than half of the people watching me are not from America. But I imagine many of you have some sense that something crazy is going on here. And I have a lot of insight into what it is. I just haven't really wanted to. Well, to be honest with you, I haven't wanted to take responsibility for sharing it. Partly because I don't want to take doesn't matter. Here's the problem. There are essentially pedophile rings. And it's deeper than a ring. Like when you imagine a group of people who get together, it's an energy. It's a collective energy. It's an entity of sorts that feeds through and most definitely corrupts powerful people. I'm sure Many of them are in Washington. I am equally sure that opposing them in the manner that QAnon and such attempt to do is not effective. You can't oppose an entity this way. The only way to oppose an entity is to register what feeds the entity and then take away its food. And to do that effectively, you have to do that within yourself. So ultimately, and I promise you, this is how it works, that traces down to one simple dynamic. How are you wounded, and how are you handling your woundedness? Because a wide range of the ways in which people avoid woundedness involve making devil's bargains, making horrible connections energetically that help distract from the pain. Now, it's understandable to want solace from pain, particularly when it haunts you, generating addictions and abusive behavior in your current life. And you need to have a long-term commitment to heal. And if you don't, you feed the beasts. And they're real. They're awful and real. Having been molested myself, I went through years of hauntedness and years of attempting to pay attention to things that would distract me from what was happening. To my credit, I didn't know what had happened to me. It was a repressed memory, but I can remember my behavior and recognize someone who was erratically attempting to be strong in ways that would distract me from what was going on beneath the surface. And as I came to terms with what had happened to me, I confronted very directly this choice every abused person has. Are you going to continue the abuse, or are you going to end it? Now, most people fall somewhere in the middle. Most people have zero desire to perpetuate the abuse, but they're also haunted by pain, confusion, delirium, sickness, woundedness that invades their consciousness and ruins much of how they live. I know this. I lived it. And I met so many people healing from abusiveness and watched this wide range of coping mechanisms. The reason this is happening now is because America received the garbage of the world. We received a lot of the treasure also. But I assure you, much of the worst was kicked out of everywhere else and sent here. And we live with this legacy. Now, I do not refer to people as garbage. I refer to energy as garbage. And we live with this garbage, and that garbage coalesces and it feeds sickness. And this is happening. It's fucking factual. It's tough to measure. We have very few agreed upon standards in which to identify what is real and what isn't. It is definitely concerning to believe individuals such as myself who inform you of things that you might not have much knowledge of and then tell you, just trust me. And I don't. I'm simply sharing what I know because we have to learn to confront these forces and end them. When I confronted the force that had molested me, I confronted a force that I believe took over the person who did the deed. It wasn't them. It was a force that was older than him. And it offered to make me strong. Very present, very right here, right with me. It offered to make me strong in a way that would terrify people for the rest of my life. It offered to turn me into someone who would intimidate people so deeply just with my presence that they would bend to my will without me having to speak. And it said one condition: don't ever tell women what happened to you. This is the end of an era. This era has been ruled by the patriarchy. Now, to me, this is going to get more specific. The patriarchy is not just the idea that a man is in charge. It is the idea that a kind of masculinity that does not feel its emotions and farms its own emotional energy out to the women around them and to the men who lose to them, for real, forces everybody else around them to digest their emotional energy. So every fucking day they wake up, they generate negative energy, feelings they don't want to face. And it's completely 100% normal to them to give that energy, to force feed that energy to the women near and the men who don't know how to outfight it. This is the foundation for what we have known of as normal. And the deal says, I'll be strong, I'll keep you safe. It's primal, traces all the way back to caveman. Now, people don't want to know this about themselves and the world around them. But when you just get a little bit outside of stable communities, these dynamics emerge whereby it's straight up tribal, not tribal even, like caveman. And it's like the strongest man is going to win. And people adjust around this person. And they're making a deal. And they're making a deal to be decreasingly powerful. Part of the deal is they can never be as strong as the strongest man, because the strongest man is going to be the strongest man. And then from there, they have to abuse someone else. So they'll take some shit and then they take their shit out on someone else. And the women must buy in, because the strongest man can rape them and legitimize it. Call it normal. Call them mine. I mean, this is not gone. This still happens plenty of places. The effective center of gravity for whole communities is designed around men such as this, and has been for quite a long time. And some of the worst of them came here. We don't want to face this. We don't want to face this. And here in my country, in the United States, we don't want to face this. I do call out the rest of the world to an extent, being like, we pushed out some of the worst people and sent them here. But there's not much we can do about that. What we can do is acknowledge the truth that some of the most vicious, heartless, unmoored, and unconnected to roots people live here. And they think this way. And they are food for sick entities. Now, I entitled this, What is Really Happening? What's really happening is that the time for these patterns to win is ending. That is the most important thing that is happening right now. These patterns work in alpha triangles. And typically, these are like lonely predators who they carve out some territory and they make everyone else go away. They're not naturally wolf packs. Sometimes they function as coyotes, coming together to hunt at the same time, certainly politically and in business. But for the most part, they're individuals who want to live out on their own and dominate a range of people around them. And they don't want to feel that themselves. They don't want to get in a hierarchy where anyone else can shit on them. And so they've had an effective détente for most of human history, except when things are dangerous and communities have to come together. And then they come together and they put themselves under someone. They accept some kind of authority. And that's what we've been having with Drumpf. He's effectively gathered many of these beings and forced them under him. He broke Ted Cruz like a fucking matchstick. And the man recreates himself as Drumpf's bitch. And that's exactly what it is. This isn't crass exaggeration. That's what happened. You can watch it. If you watched and measured energetically what happened, he dominated them in that way and forced them to be in relationship to him. And what he effectively did was gather all of this energy, all of the most dysfunctional energy centered through patriarchs who refuse to feel their feelings, nothing but anger and nothing else, no weakness, nothing weak, nothing. Crying is weak. Tenderness is weak. Humor in many cases is weak unless it's about degrading someone else. Seriously, they operate on those rules. And God bless you if you don't know people who work this way, because it's in most places that I have seen. So the functional purpose of this particular person at this time was actually to dominate and bring this all together and then drive it into the ground. They are committing energetic suicide. The pattern that enables them to function is dying. The pattern that has fed them has eaten sickness. It is functionally eaten sickness that refuses to heal. And to be real is to recognize that most people in this world feed such monsters in some way, in one way or another. It involves avoiding your pain, any way in which you avoid your pain rather than being willing to face it. And I don't just mean physical pain. I particularly mean emotional pain. I particularly mean loss. I particularly mean insecurity. I particularly mean fear of pursuing your dreams. I particularly mean trauma that you bury. And unfortunately, most definitely the trauma you've forgotten, the trauma that's so bad it got repressed. Entire ways of being get generated on top of such choices that they feed these beasts. And these beasts are not humans. It's just it's a collected energy. And then that energy seeks to take over individuals and function through them. Now, this is fucking scary. No one wants to think about this shit. But I assure you, it's not better to pretend it's not true. Certainly not anymore. Part of this change, part of the change we are going through right now, is we must become aware on a wider range of levels of what is really happening. We must become aware of it and clean it. We have to think of it as cleaning, okay? Don't think of it in dramatic terms. I began much of this sequence by emphasizing that when you engage evil on this level, the first and most important influence you have is in how you conceive this situation. If you conceive the situation through an inappropriate or inaccurate paradigm, you essentially feed the beast. You feed it your own strength. So the most effective way you respond is say, how do I stop feeding it? And the beautiful answer is that you must heal. You must heal, and you must help other people heal. And you must address yourself first. My experience, as I've been attempting to share week by week, is that it is by asking for help when I need it that I can rest in the confidence that the leadership, the guidance, the healing support that I offer others can be healthy. And right now I'm shaken. I'm going through it. I'm going through days of deep confusion, feeling trauma from my past. It's all coming up at this time it's not an accident. Stuff is surging for all of us. That's what a transformation does. It shakes the foundations of what we've known to be real. People don't know how to see outside what you know of as normal. In most cases, you can't even conceptualize. You can't even begin to dream beyond a certain distance from what you know of as normal. I once had a dream that I was confronting Donald Trump. And as I started to talk to him, I asked strong questions, clear, but not aggressive at first. Like, what is your purpose? And I just kept turning responses into questions, and he fell apart as an individual. And he was just this haunting, sucking system that said jobs, pain, fear. A massive centralization of energy that's attempting to collectively avoid itself. Millions upon millions of people who don't know how to handle their emotions, predicated in families where the men functionally rape the women. And I say that to get your attention to the truth, in that that's not how she really wants to fuck. She just doesn't know how to change it. She doesn't think she has any ability to change it. And the men who fuck in that way are functionally in charge. This is what I have seen time and time again. Certainly, millions upon millions of the men who live in communities, rural, that are often called racist as a baseline, treat their women well. The problem is that the men who don't are in charge. That's who's in charge. That's who everyone avoids. That's who everyone fears. That's who the people in the community can't confront, can't unsettle. That's who can retaliate and get away with it. In whole communities, both within cities and encompassing whole rural towns and regions, that's who's in charge. We remove this one person, we're not solving that fucking problem. We are taking significant steps towards changing it, however. When there is no longer a sense that this is acceptable, it changes things a lot. This is the end of an era. It is the end of a very old era in which men like this get away with way too much. And the only way to fully end it is to realize that it's never been about the individuals. It's always been about the pattern, the energetic pattern, and the entities that feed on this pattern. It's a mistake to think of them too concretely as personalities. They're conscious, but a sickness, it's more like a mold in many ways. You kind of have to get it from every side, cleanse it. And I assure you, the best way to do this is to weaken it by stopping its blood. It's not just food, it's blood. It feeds on the life force of beings who cannot confront their full power. That's what this ultimately amounts to. And this is what happens when we begin to address these forces together in any form of community. If 40% of you is sick and you don't know how to confront that sickness, you don't know how to even begin to see it in a way that could help heal it. So you essentially functionally try to avoid it, try to hold it down, hold it at bay. One of the major ways people avoid it is to feed it to some entity. They don't know that's what they're doing, but that's what they're doing. And when they feed it to that entity, they get to live at a less powerful level, but they also get to be less haunted by their own pain and trauma. It's a terrible bargain that most people that I have met in this lifetime are making on some level or other. And this is ending. The beauty of this is profound. It's like if you live on the ground and there's no computers, there's nothing, there's no big human buildings, there's nothing dramatic that enables you to get far away quickly. So all you know is what you can see, and you can't see in any direction more than 20 miles in a completely flat world. So you're not leaving, you're not exploring, and you just can't see beyond where you can see. For most of your life, that's what it's like. And then one day, someone shows you how to climb a tree. It's always been there. The tree's always been there. But it just didn't even occur to you that you could climb it. And all of a sudden, someone shows you how to climb the tree, and you start up, and almost right away you recognize things you've never seen before because you can see further away. Until you get perspective on what's real, there are so many ways in which you simply feed life as you've known it. I'm reading your words, Bliss. Thank you for being here. I love it. Yes, like that story. And it is my greatest hope that I can help you to fly in such ways. When it is normal for most people to live at reduced levels of intensity, when you dream, when you imagine, the foundations of your dreaming are predicated on the way you begin to dream. And thus, mix it, match it, color it, change it, darken it, lighten it, you're not going to be able to create visions outside a certain range. I'm offering to you that one of the most fundamental restrictions on the range is that there are these built-in circuit breakers whereby people don't want you to heal. Because this is the next level, is that if you are functioning with most of your spirit alive, that challenges everyone you come into contact with just through your presence. By being present, you are resonating what's possible. You don't have to speak. You don't have to stand up to them when they're rude. You don't have to write a play that teaches people to see the world, and you just have to be. You stand near them and you affect them, and you essentially call them a liar. They feel it, and they do learn that it's you pretty quickly. They recognize it. They don't know what they're recognizing. They can't put two and two together, but they effectively connect that when you're near them, they feel like a fraud. Now, beneath that, they're in pain. That's the problem, that we're surrounded by beings who are all in pain. Most people are suffering in ways that are not normal, not okay, and impossible to dream beyond. See, how do you dream of a world in which people are well when you've never lived such a thing? Well, you have. You have. This is not you. This is just what you're hanging out as now. But it forces you to the limits of this lifetime. It forces you to ask this question: are you willing to recognize yourself beyond this lifetime? There's no other way, because beyond this lifetime, you know something else. You know something else. And that something else exists on entirely different frequency levels, in entirely different zones of consciousness. And to embrace them, you must be able to allow yourself to dissolve the boundary that says this is all you are. And that hurts. That's scary. That's terrifying. It's a dissolution. It's a death. It's a death. And the first time is the most frightening time. Once you learn how to do it more, it becomes a much less painful challenge. And the gift is that you reconnect to this deep sense, and you have it. You who are here, you have it. You know there is something much more beautiful. You know it. You know it whether or not you've seen it much in the humans who you've lived with. You must trust that your greatest impact is in how you begin to believe. Yes, the sickness is a part of this. We are turning the age. And when the age turns, energetic patterns, literal electromagnetic patterns that are the foundation, the base rhythms of the ways we interact, begin to change in a way they haven't changed in a very long time. Generation after generation has learned patterns of behavior from those that have come before, and those patterns are measurable. We get the right instruments, we can take readings and draw graphs, I assure you. And at fundamental times in human history, dramatic shifts occur in the way these relationships work, and they are measurable in electromagnetic pattern. It's more analogous to dancing. Tango has rules. There are steps. There's a way. Once two people learn the basics, they can dance within those rules. They're not moving in certain ways, and they're choosing to move in other ways. And for a long period, some people love dancing this way. Just like square dancing, just like tribalism, just like shamanic prayer, just like Jewish folk dancing. These are all different ways of moving, which could be measured. And you're saying no to certain kind of movement and yes to other kind of movement. Why does this matter? Because if you are used to all of your life existing with this kind of energetic dance happening, and it's just normal. You're moving like this. You're moving like this. So you can't even get perspective. You don't even know how to ask why you can't do a flip. You can't even think it because our very thoughts get shaped by the prevalence, the dominance of the continuity of these patterns over and over and over again, recurring, all around you, in you. It's in you. Your energy body is dancing in rhythms. And these fundamental rhythms are changing on a level that hasn't happened for centuries. Centuries. And I'm telling you that this is a pattern that activates a frequency, a core base frequency that unites the world. That's what's happening right now. Yes. Yes, Om. Wow. I'm being present with this dream that you had. Me. I lived for 30 years, 23 years with repressed trauma. Came out when I was 30. And I've done a lot of work to heal it. However, in this past week, it's going yet another level deeper, and I'm recognizing this inner child, this wounded boy within myself. This is me. This is mine. This is a part of myself that I was so cut off from, I didn't even know he was there. And yet it's this stunning experience of being present with this consciousness that it's like I'm mad at myself This part of my consciousness, this fractured shard of my consciousness, is mad at me for denying its existence. I know, as a relatively mature adult, I know as a deep student of healing that what I can do most is be present enough to heal even a level deeper and integrate this part of myself. And as I do, the fracturedness within me dissolves and I unite. I become that much more powerful because I'm no longer fighting myself. I've watched this happen repeatedly for me. And I've become stronger and stronger over the years, not through trying to get stronger, but through confronting my woundedness and embracing it yet a little bit more. And it's, every time I think I've completed and I've completed on a certain level. And this is something else. And the message I'm getting at this is this. I've said this elsewhere. I'll say it again. When we go up, we go down. We go from a tight range of energy, and then we gain a higher range of energy, but we also gain a lower range of energy. And the lower range of energy, we must confront anything that's been wounded, repressed, traumatized, ignored within ourselves. And this process is supposed to happen together. I have been enlightening more and more recently, and I've partly anticipated, like, all right, what's going to wake up? What am I going to have to do? What am I going to have to face? And I say this because I believe this is the way. This is the modeling. This is what everyone has to do. I say this with an awareness that I have known this entire time and yet not been called to share that there is something that QAnon is facing that's real. Now, every time I know this, every time I think about it, I pray. And what I get is be quiet, because functionally they've been doing more damage than good. Functionally, I would hazard that most of the most influential people in the movement, such as it is, were molested themselves. And they're trying to confront the pain that they feel in a way that doesn't really work. Nonetheless, there are child molester rings, and they are predicated on beings that do it on purpose to be powerful. And they feed upon chains of humans, and some of them certainly are in Washington. Now, the most obvious one of all is Trump himself. That don't even have to say much to suggest that person was abused, avoids all human emotion, dominates at every turn, feeds upon anything perceived as weakness, lacks all empathy. That's what it looks like. So the terrible sadness is that they're trying to fight their own leader functionally. I cried yesterday. I love this country. I really do. I believe the most powerful gift I can give to this country is to believe in what it wants to be. It's not about making America great again. It's about making it great to begin with. It's about living up to the lie of a dream. Thus far, it's still a lie. It's a potential. It's a lie because it was always predicated on abusing a wide range of people. The new guy, for sure. When that was the Irish, fuck the Irish. When that was the Italians, fuck the Italians. It was always to hell with Native Americans and African Americans and Mexicans. It was always that. But we don't want to stare at it we don't want to stare at it because that was neighbors still in many Eastern cities, for sure. That was neighbors. The families do remember how they were treated, how they treated each other, what they had to forget in order to fit in. It's been horrible, horribly abusive. People don't want to think it, they don't want to feel it, but these are the wounds. These are the wounds. And just like in individuals, these wounds function collectively. And these wounds are energy, and these energy feed entities. And these entities turn around and try to take people over and get people to function in their patterns. And it's ending. It's ending. I've climbed the tree. For those of you who were around when I began this metaphor, I have climbed a tree that people weren't climbing. The Kabbalah, the Hebrews, they call it the tree of life. You climb the vibes and you can get outside the confines of what is normal to your community. You do have to leave a direct relationship to the people you love, which I have done repeatedly. It's sad. It's hurt. It's lonely. I'm going to go longer. This is a bit self-indulgent. So for those of you who are present, I thank you in part for your care. There are things that I've wanted to share, and I'm going to allow myself to share them. And I'm going to tell you very clearly. I know that sometimes I get to a point in which there's something that's important, that's really important for you, that's needed, that's good, that's going to be a gift. But I can't get there because I've got my own baggage in the way. And I can tell that I'm at one of the such limit right now. So I take no offense, even if you go away and come back. And thank you for being here to the extent that you are. I assure you, what I have to share you is functionally like, you can't even, it's very special. And in the way. In order to learn, to understand and see and feel in the ways that I do, I really went into deep extremes, and I went away. I left my main friendships. It started with a woman who I didn't know very well, who was very enthralling. And we left it all together, and I went out into the world, and I went back to my parents' home 2 or 3 times over the next 10 years. But I kept leaving again and going into communities again and again where I knew no one and learned a lot. And I've lived through some things that it's very lonely in that while I felt an extraordinary amount of spiritual presence and love, there's something about human attention. There's something about human presence that there's nothing that makes up for it. So I was kept sane by the presence of angels watching me and teaching me what to do. But it's like no humans know what it was like. And I want to share some of these things. And so it's seemingly disjunctive with everything I began with, but this is what it is. And I'm really grateful for your respect. And by the way, I took my glasses off. I can't read comments right now, but this is what I need to do right now. My eyes are going crazy. Incidentally, my eyesight went bad when I was molested at 7. That's when my eyesight went bad. All right. The place I always come back to, Occupy, Oakland. I played such an extraordinary role at that place, and I can't get it out of my head because it's like it wasn't real. Now, a fair number of people saw, but nobody was inside me. So not knowing that, I've rarely tried to talk about it because I always feel like a jackass. I always feel like I'm bragging or it's awkward or I'm disrespecting the experience or something. But here goes, because I got to talk about it. First of all, I made a speech there 5 days in. This matters to me so much now because I just watched. I just watched this massive people rush our capital. And it hurt much more than I expected it to. Like something gripped into my heart. And I have to tell you, I played a major role in preventing stuff like that from happening at Occupy Oakland. It took every bit of courage in my life. I made a speech in front of 1,000 people there. And there's no way I would make this speech if I had planned it. What I did was I prayed for God to speak through me, for the most important message to move through my system. And what I ended up saying was, get dignified, stop littering, stop drinking and throwing bottles. This isn't a fucking party. I said that after a hip hop concert. I really did. It's out there somewhere on YouTube. I haven't looked much, but I'm sure it was filmed repeatedly. I think I looked crazy. I didn't get any compliments for it directly. But I also think I scared the shit out of them. Like, who the fuck is that? Like, what is he doing? Now, frankly, I'm telling you this because I love what I said. I love it. It was disjunctive in a way that was true to my heart. It wasn't logically, like, you wouldn't write a speech like this. But what I said was that there are problems that people are ignoring. And it's like a poison in the bottom of a mine. Mines, they used to take canaries down coal mines because the canaries would keep singing. But if they ever stopped singing, it meant that a vein of poisonous gas in some form had opened up and the canary died. The canary would die before the people, the other people, the miners. So they knew if the canary stopped singing, they had to leave. So what I said was, the singing is dying. The people are sick in a way that's killing their singing. And that's a sign that everyone is being exposed to poison. We have to come together to heal it. We can't keep believing that these problems aren't real and our governments are not facing them. And that remains true. See, we're ending something horrible in this drum. It's truly terrible. And yet, we're going to go into the hands of people who don't know the singing. They don't know the singing heart. That's what I see. There's a poison in our communities that's global. And when we don't identify it for what it is, we all stay sick and then we normalize the sickness and we get used to living at 60% of our power, 40% of our power. People dying prematurely, people lethargic in ways they can't move, people not singing. I said that at Occupy Oakland after a hip hop concert. I didn't say the last part. I didn't take it that far, but I can feel it now. It was so hard once I got out. Because I did earn respect. I mean, I think there was a sense of people like, whoa, who the fuck did that? And I did keep respect. But, it's like respect comes with fear. Sometimes fear feels respectful. I definitely didn't have people going, yay, wonderful, awesome job. And it hurts like hell because that took some of the most courage I've ever had. And what's happening to me right now is I'm watching this violence get out of hand. And I'm remembering the many times. Now, people saw this, but I don't know them, and I never met them again. Or multiple fucking times when I confronted people who were threatening to kill other people with nothing, no weapons, with my hands like this. Multiple fucking times I confronted that from my heart and called them down, told them to be more noble, more loving, to pray for everyone, not to feed hatred. I almost fucking died repeatedly for love and peace. It took all the courage in my existence. And not much has been particularly real since I fucking did that. It's like, forgive me, but we live in a world where toughness is still measured by like some action hero killing their enemy. But you fucking tell me why it isn't more noble to face death without weapons and to leave the situation more peaceful. Why isn't every man who does that? Why isn't every woman who does that more respected than our bullshit concepts of Bruce Willis and Die Hard. Seriously. So my life hasn't been as real since then. But let me tell you, before I confronted one of the most frightening experiences there, I meditated for 10 minutes on the concrete. I sat down on a stone ledge and meditated for 10 minutes until I knew what to do. 10 minutes, 10 fucking minutes. That's the power of meditation for me. A woman there screamed at me. I confronted a woman who was screaming at a lot of people all at once. And I confronted her gracefully, just firmly. And she screamed at me, and I just reflected it. And she left. Never saw her again. She was gone. And I did one yoga pose. And it is the most exquisite yoga pose I've ever done in my life. That energy channeled down from above me, down into the ground. And I was like, oh my God, no wonder they call these poses warriors. I just took all that warrior energy, stilled it. Stillness. These moments, there have been so many in my life. 10 years I was traveling. I almost died more than 20 times. There are situations in which no one would have been surprised if, the story was, dude was doing this and then he died. Swimming across a shark-infested area where oil tankers fly through, and I was a bad swimmer. A mile and a half, I swam that shit because I was mad. Confronting knives. Staring down very, very, very angry men who I knew were raping. You know what a man does when you tell him that he's not allowed to fuck a woman who he wants to fuck? He wants to kill you. I know. I've felt it repeatedly. I lived with the prayer that I could be someone who makes the world a better place. And I haven't gotten much credit for that, and that's good with me. I think I've always most respected people who did the right thing without seeking attention or even respect. I've repeatedly chosen that. I've honored those who have extreme talents but chosen not to sell out. And it took me a while to realize, that's me. It's actually me. Most of the time, I was just respecting someone else who I understood as that. So it's something else to, step into myself and be like, okay, this is who I am. What can I do? What's my calling now? So my calling thus far has been to make this YouTube channel, and I'm scared. I'm scared of where this goes. It draws honesty out of me. It creates company, it creates people seeing me in ways, as much as I would have appreciated it if people understood how much courage and love it took to take many of the steps I've taken in my life. I grew accustomed to the isolation. I liked it in plenty of ways. So getting seen as I've known myself, is it's a little uncomfortable. That's why it's nice for my glasses to be off. And I'm sorry, forgive me, like that I'm not reading the comments. I just need this distance right now. Because it's also important that I get this out. I'm haunted by these memories. I've tried to write them. It doesn't work very well. I've recorded them and discarded them repeatedly, trying to give myself the right to edit them. It's perfectly plausible. I'll pull this video down. I do that. I'll record something and then I'm uncomfortable. I'm like, I'm rambling too much. There's no point. I want to have a more focused professional presence online. Whatever. But tonight, incidentally, I've smoked a bowl and had 2 shots of whiskey. And it's medicinal, it puts me in a space to be honest and to trust a flow that I often resist in insecurity. This is another level of stuff that's in the way of me sharing more openly. I definitely have felt the draw, the appeal of if I want to earn respect, I don't want to be a stand for drugs and such. But here's the thing. I've made it through. I've made it through years and years without drinking, but I haven't been more than half a year without smoking pot. And I suppose I carry a level of shame about that. However, Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, just announced that they're going to legalize it. And that's yet another level of, when something's not condoned by society, it just carries this inherent shame. But the reality is that cannabis has been medicinal for me for most of my adult life. And it's not a universal good. People are so fucking lazy about thinking. It's like, who proposed this idea that man-made, artificially influenced, fucked around with pharmaceuticals are somehow going to be better for us than a naturally occurring plant? Now, the plant didn't come with a warning label that said you can do as much as me as you want whenever you want, and that'll be good for you. Of course, it can be misused. What's so terribly difficult about embracing a relationship to life that involves balances? Some can be healthy, more might not be. Why does everybody have to be so afraid of the more monster that you can't learn some? How about some and then say no to the more monster? I'm actually fairly good at that. I went years without drinking because, frankly, I don't fully trust it. I mean, alcohol has been involved in more of the worst things than any other substance on earth. And a drink or two can really help end things. Can help end resistance when the resistance is not healthy or it's time for the resistance to leave. And I've avoided exposing myself, standing up for the truth about how I live, because I'm still trying to be respectable on certain levels. And it's absurd. It's very dishonest. And the fact of the matter is, I think I have a very healthy relationship to a wide range of substances. I smoked a quarter in a year, maybe even less. I smoke when I need to, almost entirely. And when I don't, I get lethargic and I don't do anything. And when I do, and it's time, there's movement and there's a shifting of balance in a way that can last. Like I learn things, I transform things that functionally change who I am in often very healthy ways. And when it's not healthy, it has its own consequences. I get lethargic and commit to being more focused and disciplined. Because fact of the matter is, often I wake up in the middle of the night and I meditate for an hour, do another hour of yoga. And that does something nothing else does. These things are not opposed. Shiva is the god of cannabis, ganja. beyond all this. It's time to get excited. You climb up the tree and you get a vision of the world beyond what you've known, which I'm telling you I have done repeatedly. I like climbing the tree. It's much more fun than being on the ground. And you see what's coming. And what's coming is a life that's beyond what most people can conceptualize. And I'm telling you that it's predicated on committing to healing. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm laying the foundations to help people heal yourself. And I'm trying to find exactly the right balance between being willing to be present, to support and help you, and to empower you as much as possible while maintaining some boundaries that are good for me. That perfect doesn't exist. I'm difficult. I'm frustrating. I make haphazard choices. Sometimes I just want to be left alone. I desperately want to help people, and I'm terrified of getting people addicted to me and then not wanting to be there. I also am terrified of attracting people who won't leave me alone. And I need attention desperately sometimes because I haven't learned how to be honest with myself about who I've known myself to be. And somehow sharing honestly often enables that. So here I am exposing myself to complete strangers in a way that I haven't even been able to tell many of the people I love. And yet, the beauty of this medium is that I can share, and I know you can leave. I have distance from you and you have distance from me. You can come back later and watch it again. I can take this down later and trust that only the people who were supposed to be here got attracted to be here up until the time when I delete it. I like that. That feels good. I can make that prayer. That only the right people are here and will see this. And if this is really healthy for me to leave and leave up, please make that obvious to me as well. Got it. Gaiana, 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 Gaia. Hey, cool, man. Thank you, Bliss. I love you guys. I'm not supposed to go yet, but I'm telling you, like, part of me wants to, for sure. Like, there's something like pulling. I was telling stories about Occupy Oakland, and another that's really been on my mind was this time when, after the encampment, we went back. We had a big protest, and there were tons of people ready to take over the city council building, and I was inspired by it. You know, I was part of the energy, and we got in front, and people were talking, and I was like, can't handle it. This group, this vibe, can't handle it. It'll be too destructive. There's not enough discipline here to pull this off. So I talked to the circle. I made my vibe big, and I made my case. And I went into this consciousness level where it's like, I said that we can't do it. It's not there. And then I backed away and I sat on a bench and I said, I'm sitting right here. We have many of the same prayers and dreams, but if you go in there and start tearing the place up, we're going to make ourselves look like thugs, a mob. We lose all credibility. I did shit like that. There's a time when I showed up midnight downtown Oakland with a lot of people who don't want to be anywhere near cops. And I was there. I slept there again and again and again. And I show up. I'd been away. I came back, and somebody was up on a lamppost, holding a lamppost, making a speech with a bullhorn, and was calling to arm ourselves. And I just went close. And I did what I often did. I said, if I'm needed, I made it as a prayer. I held it. I'm like, if I'm needed, make it clear what you need of me. Do you have any fucking idea what kind? Like, who cares? Like, whenever anyone faces one of their biggest fears, that they're facing one of their biggest fears, right? Well, I was fucking terrified to stand up on a lamppost at midnight in downtown Oakland with people arguing for violence and say something else. And I got up on the fucking lamppost because somebody said, you have something to say, don't you? And I said, yes, I do. And I got up on the fucking lamppost and I held that thing. And I said, it takes more courage to face a gun without a gun. And it's okay if you're not ready to do that. But we're not going to change the world by falling victim to the same patterns that have run the world up until now. And I got down off that lamppost and the crowd dispersed. And I walked over to a group of, they looked more like hippie kids. I asked if anybody had some rolling papers. You've never seen people scramble so fast again. that felt great. You know, it's like, that's all the respect I needed. I can still remember that feel. I can still remember that, you know, it's like, I didn't want them to kiss my ass or anything. I was trying to inspire people to be strong, but that took a lot. That took a lot of courage for me to do. And it felt good. The kids were running to get me some rolling papers. And I can't fucking believe that I resist letting y'all know that when I get scared, sometimes I smoke a ball. Because that shit is medicine for fear. You want to know something else I did there? 4:20 in the fucking morning, I smoked pot. The first night of camp was taken down, and 100,000 cops showed up, surrounded the whole fucking place. Watch them come out like military, like to the left, to the line, stop. But I just smoked pot. This is one of the tweakiest moments of my life. And they all line up, and I left. Now, I had gone to this one corner because not so many people were at this corner. So I thought we should come down to this corner and be a bastion. And most people went to the other end. And so most of the people were there at the end, and there were 20 of us at this corner. And then I look around, and there were 3 of us at this corner. It's like everybody else ran away or went to the other group. I don't know. But all of a sudden I was like, well, I could do this with 20 people. I don't know what I feel now. So the cops showed up and they said, get across this line. And I did. I left. I walked across this line. I left. And that was cowardice. That was the motto of the day. Don't leave. Stand up for the space. So I crossed the line and with these other 2 guys. And we were off the grounds of the plaza. So they were like, we won't arrest you. And then I watched my friends, my new friends, and they were led by and all in handcuffs one by one. I was like, holy fuck. Felt like such a coward. So I went out. There's this line, straight line of cops, right? You have to understand, it's definitely not all cops. There are I've had so many good interactions with cops, but the reality is, in plenty of American cities, a cop could kill you and nothing would happen. They could just say they thought you had a gun. So living in that fear where I knew I was considered an anarchist, like, I I was, regardless of the reality, I was facing what I knew of as death. I knew I could die. When I walked out in front of this line, right? This line, and I started lecturing them, like, with the fiercest energy I've ever known, man. "Who the fuck do you think you are? Do you not know how to see a real dream? Do you not know how to see love? What are you doing? What do you stand for? You know that cop?" And I named him who'd shot Oscar Grant, a young man who had been shot in handcuffs. "Do you know him? Do you know him? Do you watch him? Who in their right fucking minds would kill a boy on the ground with his hands cuffed?" And I lay down on the ground right in front of them, mimicked being a boy. Like, "You wouldn't shoot me, right? Because I'm fucking white." That took some courage. I was trying to get arrested because I felt like I'd let my friends down, but they just didn't know what to make of me, and they didn't do anything. They just stared at me. Such a trip. There's 20 cops that saw that happen, but God only knows who they are. So it's like it didn't happen. But these 2 guys came and they picked me up off the ground. These 2 guys had stayed, one Hispanic and one black, and they carried me away. Couldn't walk. Put my whole put my whole heart into that. It's like it didn't even happen. 'Cause I never tell anybody about it. Holy fuck, that was scary. You have to understand, for the most part, white people don't have to know that fear. But when you hang out with people of color long enough, they teach you to understand what it's like when it's like a fear beyond a fear. Like, for most white people I grew up with in an upper middle class society, your greatest fear, you won't say it out loud, but your greatest fear is someone dark skinned coming to kill you with a knife. Something like that, right? But you don't know fear until the person who could kill you is completely beyond repercussions. There is no way they will get in trouble. They could fuck your wife and kill you and get away with it. And don't tell me I mean, it fucking happens. I'm not saying it happens a lot, but it happens, and the men who do it don't get stopped. And when you spend enough time in the ghetto in the United States, you learn that. So I knew in those moments that I had allied myself. I had aligned myself so thoroughly because I was camping there. I was on TV repeatedly, making small statements and such, putting up tents. I knew that any cop could kill me and nothing would happen to them. They didn't have to be afraid of it. So all I'm really saying is, hey, I confronted that fear in the way I did. It it took a lot of heart. It's been hard for me to live a real life having gone through some of these extremes. Like, a lot of veterans talk about it. They go to war and it's hard to live. It feels like nothing else hits those peaks, those emotional intensities. So it's like nothing else is real. God damn it, my eyes. Wow. Here I am. And I'm telling you, like, I've done a lot of things in life that have gotten some attention. I made speeches there. I I bet I was in plays. I was in musical as in high school. I've performed hundreds of times on stage, small stages, but I've done it. I've made speeches other places. In college once, I stood up on a table and called for 1,000 people to be quiet. I called for 1,000 people to be quiet, and I read a beautiful woman a poem. And they actually shut up. It was stone silent. It was hilarious. I'd never kissed a girl before, so I had this disproportionate courage and desire. Uh, that one's funny, and I do still have friends that remember I did that. One of my more prouder moments is time in New York City. I smoked some pot at 4 o'clock. I was working this job, this high paying job in the financial district, and I was getting increasingly sick of it, and I was pushing the edges. I just walked out one day, and I went and sat under a tree at Battery Park and smoked a little bat. And I'm like, I'm just going home. I was, effectively giving up. So I went to the subway early, and I get on the subway. And half the subway is packed all around the door, and the other half is empty. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I push myself through to get a little more space, and there's this man, big, tall man, sitting on the ground. He has some candy bars open in front of him on the ground, and he's sitting and he's like primal, and nobody wants to be near him. So I went and I sat right in front of him. Not right, but close. There was space there. And he took interest in me. He looked up. Bear in mind, like half the subway's there, staring in dead silence. And I'm just sitting there, and this guy like looks up. And he just starts to stare at me. And I'm just still, and like I just remember being like, I don't feel threatened. Like it's like we're out of touch with our intuition. There was no threat there. It was very clear. He did not wish me ill. So what other people were seeing was a projection. But he did not wish me ill. And I was just there. He stared. He stared, and he came a little closer. Then he fell in for a hug. And he hugged me. And I got up and left at my stop, which was next. Just remember saying, have a nice day. Have a nice day. Have a nice day. Like a little boy. At the time, I didn't know that I'd been molested, traumatized as a child. And I think there was this like extreme part of my repressed self that was just like a little kid all the time. But like a goodness in me. And that was the end. That was the beginning of the end of my job there. Pretty soon, a couple weeks after that, my mind started to break down. I was holding hope. I do this thing where I'm like, if our consciousness exists between here and here, when we try to go up, we also go down. I was trying desperately to go up with my consciousness, and I dropped the floor out. And it was all living together. So it's like normal had expanded, and I didn't know how to make sense of it. But I got a couple really powerful insights. One, get the fuck away from the coast. I saw New York City flooding someday. I saw panic as people tried to leave. I keep thinking about like, why don't I sell this more? Well, I don't want to induce panic in people. I don't want to push someone to move and then have it be wrong. What the fuck are we doing? The faucet is on. Have you looked at video from Greenland? There are rivers never existed before. Rivers coming off the ice sheets, they're just pouring water. They're just pouring water into the ocean. Cold water goes into the North Atlantic. It comes down and affects the Gulf Stream, which is going in this circle, slows it down. When you slow the Gulf Stream down, you change weather, which you change it, you mix it up, which creates more storms. That's what we got. It's not going to get better. So I saw it flooding, committed to leave. And I had another vision. And I don't get to this fucking vision because I don't share all the other stuff that I've shared. I had a vision that the future of the world is in half the companies going out of business and the other half going through Scrooge experiences where they become good people. That it's by design, that it's set up for this to happen, that people will increasingly learn to cooperate with each other. And there comes a point in which people who are good at cooperating genuinely are better people. They learn how to empathize, they learn how to understand, they learn how to listen. And in an age when bribery and thuggery has a dominant effect on what occurs, when you can essentially get someone to do work for you and then not pay them and get away with it, when you can punk someone out, threaten them with violence or threaten their family in order to get contracts, that's not actually capitalism. That's mob rule. That's corrupt. That's criminality. We live in that. Every fucking country in the world is still in dominant relationships with such forces, such people, such businessmen. And our America has been run by one. And I saw a future beyond it. I saw a future in which goodness actually begins to win. And it wins in such a way that greed no longer has such a draw. So the greedier people are more difficult to work with, so they collaborate less. But the most effective businesses will be better collaborators because they'll be more efficient, they'll have better services, they'll have better ability to get new partnerships that enable them to enter new markets and win. And there's this tipping point when we actually get the thugs in line, where the real market, the real free capitalist market that's free from corruption, free from criminality, will actually become something quite good. And there's a natural progression into goodness because cooperation is generated by better people who understand each other, care about each other, and ultimately are less motivated by greed, because at a certain point, greed is not particularly motivating. It's a very uninteresting person who is primarily motivated by greed. What kind of fucking person wants a bigger house more than they want a better marriage? No joke. Are you insane? Like, it's insane. You want to know insanity? Insanity is wanting a bigger house more than a better marriage. Do you know what it's like to have a good marriage? Oh my God. I'm only learning. I have a wonderful wife, and we still hurt each other sometimes in ways that I dearly hope we will learn how not to hurt each other. But my God, when we do well, there's no way you would trade ambition. And anyone who does trade ambition, eventually these people will stand out more and more, and they simply will not win. That's the vision I had. Such people will not win in the future. Now, I have to tell you, my depth perception was a little off. I didn't know that it would take this long just to expose the worst, but that's what's happening right now. And originally, this was the intention of this video, and now I'm getting back to it. Right now, the biggest fucking criminal in the United States of America is being exposed for what it is. This person has a life littered in criminality. On the simplest of levels, he just didn't pay a ton of people. He would hire them to build shit and then not pay them. The man called for the execution of 5 innocent people in a full-page ad in the New York Times. They were innocent. The public assumed that they had raped a woman in Central Park, the Central Park jogger. They called them the Central Park Five. They had not actually done it. They were five young black men. They were friends hanging out in the park. They didn't actually do it. And years later, they were acquitted. But before that happened, Donald Trump published a full-page ad calling for them to be killed. Now, it was vaguely enough framed that it was quite obviously a request for someone to do it. And more, this person has become that, putting out thoughts and statements and watching someone else do it. And I know from my inner faith, from my trusting in angels, from the guidance that I get from tuning into these stories by climbing up the fucking tree of life and getting high and asking. And actually, in this case, I don't mean getting high with pot. I mean getting high with spirit, because I get better answers. And ask, what's happening? And they say, it's the end. This is the worst being exposed for what it is. This is the worst making it obvious what he is and what everyone who follows him is. And we will see an increasingly better life from now on in this country, and probably in direct influence with much of the world. China, Russia, and Brazil, the next three biggest countries, India as well, are all ruled by authoritarian races. All of them. The whole world is dominated by this field of energy. The majority of the people on the planet have been beholden to an authoritarian, fascist energy. It's an energy, it's a pattern. And the majority of the world is living in direct relationship to such. Yes? Okay, I'll be there in just a couple minutes. I'll shut this down. And I am needed. My son's waking up a lot. Look, it's the beginning of the end. It's the tipping point. I'll tell you more in time, but I believe this has put me in a better position, to be honest, for quite a while. Much love.